individuals the power to persecute at will and instill these really wild, freaky rituals and ridiculous interpretations of their religion. And because they had that power as like being the community pillars, as like the clergymen, the preachers, you know, the popes and shit, they got away with it for a long time, right? So that's where the casting of people's culture aside, turning them into pagans and enemies and demons and shit, came from. Okay. Many humans historically in Europe, I know, have fought to separate the church from to relieve the clutches of power from the church and religion, right, in many different ways, in secularism, etc. Even just within the institution of Christianity, there's lots of splintering and formation of new versions of it because of that pooling of power and power corrupting men, basically. So I mean, yeah, well, if you want to do YouTube, you should definitely do it, bro. So right and wrong is literally just ethics that pertains to humans. Humans design systems of ethics. There's lots of different systems of ethics. There's no good argument to say that a god is necessary for morality. It's just they're all really bad arguments. In fact, right, if you want to get like a proper filber and get him to explain it to you, it's easier to argue that religious people are less moral than non-religious people based on how they formulate their ethical systems, which is basically divine command theory. It means something is good because a god says it's good or a religious text says it's good, which again, like I just explained with the sacerdotal oligarchy, it produces tyrants within the framework of religion, so they can get away with doing and saying crazy shit. Because that power is pooled there, they get to say what's moral and what's immoral, right? Based on skewed interpretations. But yeah, morals, e.g. ethics, are systems that humans produce, right? If there were no humans, there'd be no morals. So it's just as simple as that. Well, it's not that simple, but in simple terms, it is that. So if you wanted to try and run it argument, go for it, right? Many people will tell you a moral argument for God is probably one of the worst arguments you can make. Now, it would have been useful in like third phase God creation, which is societal cohesion. But in 2026, with hundreds of years of study in moral philosophy, it would be stupid. It'd be absolutely stupid. But yeah. So, not to distract from the main point. The main point is humans invented God. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. When I say independently of the mind, I literally just mean a god exists as an independent agent. So I mean it has its own mind, it has its own will, and it's capable of having an effect on our physical materiality. It doesn't need us to observe it, to acknowledge it, for it to exist and have effect. That is what I mean. There's never been evidence of a god having that capability. As far as I understand it, all knowledge of gods come from the minds of men. Even if people claim divine revelation, that's still a mind-dependent event, okay? Again, how does one intersubjectively or objectively verify a mind-dependent event? How do I... let's not go too far off the end, but... You can't verify the personal private experiences of someone else, right? Especially if that personal private experience is reported to only take place in their mind. And that's literally the realm of religion. To accept those kinds of testimonies is literally the realm of belief, to take things without proof, to accept things without proof. That might be acceptable for some things, but if you're talking about extraordinary supernatural claims, I don't think that's acceptable, personally. Now, if for you as an individual, do what you want. But if you expect the rest of the world to like capitulate to your mind-dependent event, not gonna happen. Yeah, so if you're saying you can't determine what's good and bad, you just don't understand anything. Not anything, but you're coming from a very simple school of thought. Ethics is complicated and robust. There are different systems for it. Let's give you a quick example if it's actually safe on this area. So on the screen is a non-exhaustive list of ethical frameworks. Okay, you are probably someone. Well, I know you're someone who's arguing for God being your moral arbiter. Basically, he's the one who decides what's good and bad. So based on your view on morality, which of these ethical systems best describes you? Right? I'm just going to take a guess and say divine command theory. Right? Divine command theory, in simple words, is an action's morality is based on whether it is commanded by a divine being or a religious text. Right? So I'm going to go out on a limb, or on a ledge, if you will, and say that best describes you, since you're saying God is the one who decides what's moral. Okay. If I'm wrong, let me know, but I'm pretty sure that's probably what you'll fall into the category of. Let's have a look. Of course, ethics don't come from God, right? And like I just said, if you really wanted to go at it, it's very easy to prove that religious people are more immoral than humanists or like virtue ethics, or any number of other ethical systems are more robust and useful than a divine command type of ethical system, right? So I've given you time to read what's on the screen, the various different ethical systems. Right? I'll just quickly tell you the headlines. You got deontological ethics, it's duty based. You got consequentialist ethics, that's outcome based. You got virtue ethics, that's character based. You got relativism. You got divine command theory. You got ethics of care, and you got egoism. Right, it's just as outlines. This guy is arguing that God is necessary for morality, so you know what's right and wrong. Okay, now if you say God is necessary for morality, so you know what's right or wrong, you fall into what's called divine command theory. An action's morality is based on whether it is commanded by a divine being or a religious text. Now, what I'm about to show you is a direct quote from the Bible. I think it's Isaiah 45:7. I can never remember the exact number, but I'll read to you what this says. Okay. Now go attack the Amalekites, totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them, put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Right? That's a commandment from God, right, to the Israelites, I believe. So divine command theory puts you in this situation, right? In order for you to say, actually, God, it would be wrong for me to go and unalive children and infants, you would need a humanist ethical framework. You wouldn't want a divine command theory framework to know that it's wrong to go and unalive a baby. Because you're saying what God says is right, or what the book says is right. And the book is saying that God directly says to go unalive babies, okay? So in order for you to say, no, I'm not going to do that, God, you would need another ethical framework or moral system to work from outside of what God is saying, okay? In very simple terms, okay? It's very easy to demonstrate, without being facetious, that religious moral codes are some of the most immoral moral codes on the planet. Now, that's not to say religious people individually are immoral, because that's not true. People mix and match their ethical systems as they grow. But if you're just going off what the book says, it would be some of the most immoral shit imaginable. So, hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Horrifical. Horrific. Horrifical, that's funny. But yeah, simply put, right, your point of view doesn't even give you anything close to an objective moral framework. Saying that God decides what's good and bad is literally just divine subjectivity. You're saying it depends on the mind of God. If God wakes up tomorrow and says, actually, unaliving people for fun is good, now that's good. Do you know? That's what kind of issue it puts you in. Okay? Now, I would never say there's a perfect moral framework, because there's school of thoughts. There's again, there are no authorities in this. There's no authorities in theology, and there's no authorities in philosophy. It's just people who study a lot in one school of thought and can tell you things about that school of thought. But there is no actual authority on this is what you must do, this is what you mustn't do. You are, in my view, you are always the moral agent, right? Even if we working with determinism, right? You would still be the moral agent from my view. Right? And other views, not so much. Right? But there's too much to know about ethics for me, a non-philosopher, to give you a good understanding of it. It would just be something you need to go look at for yourself. But again, is that where that leads? So what about this then? How do we get through the fire? Well, I know what we can do in the meantime, man. If we can't progress the DLC, let's go fight some dragons. No, there's no good reason to think the Trinity is actually a thing. Again, everything you're telling me is just things that pertain to your religion or your religiosity. It's not necessarily truths about gods if they exist or don't exist. It's just things that your religion says. Right? But yeah, the interpretation you have of your religious book, if we're being honest. But anyways, let's go fight Placidudux for a bit. How long we got? Yes, okay. It's the wrong way. Listen to this goofball. Look at that jargon buster. That's funny. I'm saying humans invented God. That's an explanatory claim. My basic position, if you care to know, is that all gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your God requires imagination, belief, or faith to interact with it, then it's functionally non-existent. It requires somebody to devise a concept of it to impart. It requires somebody devise a concept of it and impart it to you for you to interact with, or you yourself have to devise a concept of it in order to interact with it. It doesn't have a it's not an independent agent. Right? So if there's any words that I'm saying that you don't get, just ask me and I'll try my best to define it for you in simple terms, if that helps. But yeah, when I say a psychological construct, I literally just mean an abstract concept or an immaterial idea, right, in simple terms. An independent agent literally just means a mind that can choose and can do things without it being attached to your mind. Okay? So maybe that's not the best way to explain that. But yeah, that's what I mean by the big words. So if you had to explain this in very simple terms to a child, right? Historically speaking, even in our modern day lives, right, we can test it for ourselves. No human has ever gone out onto their native land and discovered the god of another person's land. Right? Not once in history. Why do you think that is? It's because humans devise god concepts for their needs and their cultural needs or purposes. Again, historically speaking, it's just like a form of empiricism in a way, right? There's never been one universal concept of a god. Right? There's always been different frameworks for gods that pop up in different cultures at different times. Okay, even if me and you are in the same religion and believe in the same god, we will still have different concepts of what God is, how he shows up in our lives. We'll interpret different events as being God or not being God, right? Because God is not a universal concept. It's completely mind dependent. Okay. What's on the screen is various different conceptual frameworks for gods. So you've got monotheism, one all-powerful God. Polytheism, many gods with different roles. Henotheism, one main god but others exist. Pantheism, God is the universe. Panentheism, God is beyond all. Deism, a non-intervening creator god. Animism, spirits that inhabit nature. Dualism, two opposing cosmic forces. Now, these different conceptual frameworks of God come about at different times throughout human history. Some borrow from each other to make them what they are, and some just came about by human imagination in simpler terms. Okay, imagination and hyperactive agency detection device. Okay. You can choose to believe what you want to believe. You know, like, choose.